let's be honest, when was the last time you actually had the time to distribute your content the way you're supposed to? You've got deadlines, endless content to create, and barely enough hours in the day to hit publish, let alone figure out how to get your content in front of the right people. Like, no matter how much you try to prioritize distribution, there's always something else that comes first. And deep down, you know that all that effort that you're pouring into creating that content is wasted if no one sees it. This is where Distribution First Academy comes in. This isn't just another course about sharing your content more or posting on 500 channels. It's a complete framework to fix the real issues holding your content back. It's time to stop wasting effort on content that goes nowhere and start building a process that actually moves the needle. Go to distributionfirstacademy.com today because great content is only half the battle. If you want results, it's time to master distribution. Hey everybody, before we get started, I want to thank my friends at Hatch for producing this episode. You can get unlimited podcast editing and strategy for one flat rate by visiting hatch.fm. All right, let's get in the show. Welcome to Distribution First, the show where we flip content marketing on its head and focus on what happens after you hit publish. Each week, I share playbooks, motivations, stories, and strategies to help you repurpose and distribute your content because you deserve to get the most out of everything you create. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Distribution First. I'm so excited to have Erica Schneider on the show, and Erica's been doing more stuff in content. I'll lightly in air quotes say repurposing, and we'll get into that in a minute, but I thought Erica would be an awesome guest to have on the show. She's got tons of experience, both in-house and now doing her own thing. So I think you all will get a ton of good value out of the show. So Erica, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So we were just chatting before the show, and as it happens to anybody who runs a podcast, they know the best stuff is always when you're not hitting record. So I was like, okay, we're going to stop and we're just going to get rolling in this so we don't miss any of the good stuff. So one of the things that I think is interesting, and we should just start with this, is the idea that repurposing is kind of getting attacked, or like the word repurposing is getting attacked, which is, I think, an interesting thing within marketing. You know, at some point, everything is like, oh, we're not going to say this anymore. We're going to say that. And it's roughly the same thing and means the same thing. I'm reminded of when like demand generation and and everyone is like, it's not this, it's that, it's the funnel, or it's, it's that type of stuff, right? Marketers love to just dissect terminology for what we do. So, but I'm curious, kind of like, maybe explain to me what you're hearing as far as like the repurposing side, why it's maybe kind of shifting, or how you're hearing people think about it, or even how you're thinking about that.
Yeah. So just to take a step back, I think psychologically, when you spend so much time thinking about a word or a phrase and like living it, like I totally understand, because I actually have a vendetta against the word personal brand, because I'm like, I don't want to brand myself. So I call it a personal platform. And it literally is semantics. It's just about like, what do you feel comfortable calling the thing that you're doing at that time? Because you have to be so like psychologically invested in the effort, I think, especially since we have to get so creative with it. So yeah, I've noticed that the word repurposing is totally under attack lately in like a bunch of LinkedIn posts. And I've actually made a post recently as well, where I was like, I think repurposing has a place. I like the word for the context that you take like a blog post or you take a podcast and you cut it into whatever kind of works on the platform that you're putting it onto. And it should still feel native, but it's all from like one piece, one conversation, one blog post, one idea, whatever. And then you spread it out into the world. Like, I think that that's important. But I also think that if you want to build authority around something and you want to become known for something, you have to plant a bunch of different like authority seeds, is what I've been calling them lately. So you want to take an idea and plant it and then like regenerate it in a different way over here and regenerate it in a different way over here. And so it's all the same seed, but it's growing a little bit differently in people's minds. And I think that you need both in order to like really build this moat, which is another word that content people love to use, around yourself, because you don't want to waste your stuff. So you definitely want to repurpose it. But you also need to talk about the same thing over and over and over again from a bunch of different ways and angles if you want to be known for anything or rule the category or whatever. Let's just use all the phrases.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's totally semantics and how you frame it up. One of the ways I've been framing it up with clients and with other folks that I've talked to, that's been at least, and again, it's all kind of like you said, how is it helpful for me? So for some people, building a personal brand is really helpful. Yeah, I'm building for you. It's like, ooh, I don't like that feeling, so I'm going to call it something else.
Hmm.
For me, how I kind of think about it, I break it up in two different ways. Like macro repurposing is kind of how I view what you're talking about with narrative. Like I've
Okay.
got this narrative, I've got this story, I've got these main points of view, I've got these themes that I need to be able to get out into the marketplace at a macro level.
Yeah.
Format, how I do that, context doesn't really matter at that stage. But I know at the end of the year, I want people to associate me, my brand, my company, our group with X, Y, and Z thing. All right, cool. Knowing that at the start, we need to macro repurpose, we need to regenerate these ideas all the time.
Yeah.
And so then how does that work out? And then on the micro side, that's the other side. Micro repurposing, that's all the stuff we kind of think of. It's like, how do I take this blog post and turn it into like 10 LinkedIn posts? Or how do I take this video webinar and cut it up into 18 different things?
Yeah.
How those things mix, though, I think is what's really cool, and which is where not a lot of people think about it from the messaging standpoint, at least early on that I talk to, is well, if you get the macro right and then put the micro underneath it, all your messaging just works. Or ideally, all
Exactly.
your messaging works and it flows together and it's not convoluted and you're hitting the points you want to hit. It guarantees, huge air quotes here, but it guarantees success that you are actually consistently talking about the things you want to talk about.
Right. And knowing what you want to talk about helps. Like, I think that's where a lot of people go wrong.
Yeah.
Like, content teams in general and content people that are just entrepreneurs, freelancers, whatever, in the content space, like, a lot of the time, you don't have a strong grasp on what you want to be known for or how you want to talk about a thing. So you kind of talk about everything all the time,
Mm.
and it's really hard to follow and it's totally unmemorable. The other side of it is people feel really uncomfortable repeating themselves. Like, I've worked one on one with a lot of people that want to grow on social, but I'm sure businesses have a similar feeling because it's just
Yep.
we're all humans. Like, I said the thing, people should know that I said the thing. Like, they can go find it here. So why would I say it again? And it's like, well, think about anything that you've ever been influenced by. It's because you've heard a message and it like planted that little seed, and then you heard it again and you started to think about it more, and then you heard it in a different way, and then you finally heard it from like an angle that really resonated, and you were like, oh, okay, I'm now like bought into this idea, or I'm now going to go give my money to learn more or dive deeper into this idea. It's rarely from hearing something one time.
I don't think I've ever acted on any, and again, maybe I'm not impulsive enough, but I don't know if I've ever acted on anything where I've heard it and been like, I am in on this. Cause we all have that sort of piece in our brain that's like, eh, BS meter, right? In some way,
Yeah.
shape, or form of like, I don't know. Or it's just like, it takes a lot for people to change. A
Yeah.
lot for people to change. Like sometimes the biggest enemy, most of the time, is status quo. Like, I'm good with where I'm at, right? Like it's,
Hmm.
I want to be a better person. I want to be in shape. I want to have a good, but I don't really want to do all that work. That's a lot of work. It's
Hmm.
just, I'm more comfortable with where I'm at. Yeah, no, repeating themselves, it's one of the biggest hurdles for a
Yeah.
lot of companies, because A, they don't plan long term in that way. Like from a messaging standpoint, one of the first questions I ask people or companies when I come in and work with them is, all right, at the end of this year, what do you want people to associate with you and your company?
Mm.
What message? What theme? What's the thing? And most of the time they're like, well, this thing over here and this thing over here and this thing over here. I'm like, that's all fine. But what's the one thing? Like, what's the
Hmm.
thing when they say Erica, they think fill in the blank, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that usually takes multiple meetings to get through and to really start to dive in. And it's obviously the bigger the company, the harder it is to nail on that stuff. But those type of things really do matter. And it's funny because one of the things I start when I do like distribution work, it feels odd to start there, but I almost always start with points of view and themes because
Mhm.
that is the guardrails to which everything else starts to build upon itself. So if I have content that's existing, now that I know my messaging themes, my points of view on that, I can now go to my content library and start to audit it off of that. I can say, all right, I've got my 4 like really strong points of view. What in my 4 maybe content pillars or topics that we want to talk about? How do the current pieces fit in here? What needs to be updated? How, when I go to write something for social or an email, how do I like put that emotion into the, because I mean, you know this, you worked with enough companies or edited
Mhm.
enough things that like it's just soulless. This content is just soulless. There's no opinion. There's no point of view. A lot of times it's like,
Mhm.
well, and to your point, like, yeah, you need to repeat that and probably repeat it pretty blatantly an awful lot. And I can say this from my perspective. It's funny because I don't think about it this way because it just sort of naturally happens with how I do the content. But like, and I know this, the term distribution first wasn't a thing in 2022. It wasn't a
Mhm.
thing. And then I
Mhm.
launched this podcast in 20, and now there are articles being written about how you need a distribution first content strategy.
So you started a category.
Apparently, right? And so it's like,
Congratulations.
applause to me, right? But here's the funny thing about it. Justin, how did you do that? You want to know what I did? I showed up on the show every week with people. I
Mhm.
shared the content from the show and I shared content once a week in a newsletter and 5 days a week on LinkedIn and
Mhm.
just over and over and over and over again. And does it
Mhm.
get boring for me? Maybe sometimes, but I think part of the idea and part of the fun is like, what's the new angle? Where's the shift? Where's the change?
Mhm.
Where are those things? And the unfortunate reality is you can't find those things in a keyword book, a keyword lookup. You can't find those
Mhm.
things. You have to be in it.
Yeah. I think especially when I think about company content, like no wonder B2B marketing is having a crisis of confidence right now. Like everything has just been engineered to, rank or fit into some kind of an algorithm. And the humanity and those points of views have just been totally stripped from the content. And so it's exciting to see that there's kind of this rebellion happening where customers are craving, desperately craving, like some sort of a point of view. And I think that B2B teams can really, like, should really look at what creators are doing right now
Hmm.
because they are leading the charge on this like point of view or experience based content. And I mean, there's always going to be like some people that are really bad at it and kind of have like a faux authentic point of view. Authenticity is another word that, by the way, is no longer cool.
I literally saw that the other day. You can't be authentic anymore. Don't pick a new word for
Stop
it.
trying to be authentic. Don't tell stories. Don't repurpose.
Just be yourself.
Just be. Just be. I love when people are like, be unique. Why unique?
It's the title of this podcast episode.
But I think that you should totally take a playbook out of what creators are doing. And if you look at top creators, like I don't know if Wes Kao would call herself a creator, but I think that she is like the best example of someone who is like in leadership, is in a founder position, is also a creator. And she repeats herself all of the time. Like, that she's going to be talking about something in leadership. She's going to have a really spiky point of view on it, which is a term that she coins. Like, when I think
Yep.
of Wes Kao, I think of spiky point of view because she talks about it over and over again. And she practices what she preaches. She has spiky points of view in almost all of her content. And so it's fascinating to read anything she has to say because it's always going to be really point of view driven. It's always going to be experience based. It's always going to have some sort of a story or an anecdote. And none of it feels like it's written to please anyone, any robot or any algorithm or anything. It's like, this is just me and I'm putting my message out there. And it really, really, really works for her. I know that it's harder for brands to do this because there's way too many cooks in the kitchen. Everyone has their own point of view about what the point of view should be, which is so exhausting. And, there are things like, keywords that you do still have to take into account. But either way, I think that everyone can benefit from having a point of view and some sort of a perspective, that the sooner you can agree on that as a company, I just think the better, because then, yeah, all of your content is just going to fit under this perspective and it makes all of it so much easier.
Yeah, and it helps bring focus. I think that's the thing that's really, really difficult. The bigger, even small teams, though, even for me as a it's like, what do I
Yeah.
focus on?
Yeah.
And like, I started working with one client a couple months ago, and the first thing I asked them to do is like narrow down they have multiple product. What product do you want to actually like sell more of?
Hmm.
And it's like, because there's only so many of your team members, there's only so many of you guys, and there's only so much time I have. So like, where do you really want to start to see a lift? And it was like, like, what,
Yeah.
like all of them. And it's like, well,
Hmm.
and I have to steadily, like, as I work with the team, as we're starting to do things, it's like, just because we're doing something now and putting other things off does not mean we can't ever go back to those things.
Right.
But I think it is important, like, what you say out there is a reflection of you.
Hmm.
Even if you don't, like, if you think not what you think you are putting out there, but what you're actually putting out there.
Hmm.
So that's where the repetition comes in. That's where having the consistent messaging comes in. And my goodness, if you're a B2B company listening to this, stop talking about yourself for like 5 minutes and just figure out what matters to your potential customers or current customers
Hmm.
and just help them solve those things,
Hmm.
especially on LinkedIn, on social, and on email. Like, there's a place in the world for blog posts that talk about your product. There's a place in the world for LinkedIn posts that talk about your services, but it cannot be every single day. That's my PSA.
No. Yeah, no, my PSA is like 80% helpful, solve a problem, 20%, by the way, here's my stuff. Obviously, product led content that does both is good too. But yeah, I think that there's just not enough, like, yeah, authoritative, like, this is what I give a shit about content. That stuff always stands out. Always.
Every workshop I do, or even one on one, they're always like, and this is why it's funny you say like the creator thing. What company's doing it right? Company's doing a really good job. And it's like pulling teeth to find companies that are doing a
Hmm.
good job at it. It was funny because I was digging through a bunch of papers over here earlier and I had printed out this blog post and it was Rand Fishkin from SparkToro. And I'm like, you know what? They do it right so often. They are so
Hmm.
good at what they do. Him and Amanda, the whole team over, like, small team, but like they get it. And this is why I love it, because Rand started in the SEO world and the content world of like that old school type of, and again, SEO still matters. It does.
Hmm.
But you look at their blog content and it's opinionated. You look at their webinars, they have a stake in the ground. Why do you think they get hundreds of likes on a brand page? Because
Yeah.
they have personified their brand and they know what they're talking about. I love it. I love their content.
Mhm. I'm obsessed with it. I read every single thing that they put out because it's always good. It feels like it comes from a person that knows who the hell they are.
Hmm.
Like, and that is something that I think it's hard to define who you are at any level, but it's even harder when there's like a bunch of people in the room and you just cannot figure it out. But like you said, I mean, I also struggle sometimes to figure out who the hell I am and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I definitely repeat myself a lot because I know what my through line is,
Hmm.
right? Like I want people to come to my page and think about my business as like I am the no bullshit. I'm going to help you learn how to communicate online in a way where your experiences and your unique point of view comes through and it's going to be written and edited really fucking well. Like that's
Right.
my thing. And I think a lot of people think of me like that because I talk about these things over and over and over and over again. And like I know we just met recently, but I've known you as the distribution like first person for a while. So obviously that comes from you repeating yourself over and over and over again as well.
Yeah. It's the irony of it all is it's not complicated.
Yeah.
Like, it's truly not complicated. I almost wonder sometimes, like, when I go into these companies and I like lay out the plan, that they're going to be like, no, like, it's too, like, what else do you want us to do? And the truth of the matter is, like, you don't have to do a ton of things. You don't have,
Yeah.
like, I posted about this the other day, but doing a few things really, really well, or even just okay to
Yeah.
start, like, you don't have to even be killing it to start. And then doing it consistently over time is you're just going to outlast people. You're going to outlast
What
other
are those
brands.
like one or two
Yeah,
things?
I mean, for me, it's like having like, let's take a company or even a small person, like have a core piece of content that you create that your audience can start to get to know, like, and trust you through and start to expect. For some people, that's a newsletter. For some people, that's a monthly event, or companies, it's a monthly event. For other folks, it's a podcast. For some people, it's YouTube. Pick something where people can start to know, like, and trust you and start to like learn a little bit more about you. And like, there's a reason why podcasts are so successful right now. And it's because you can drill into any given topic you could ever want.
Yeah.
I have a podcast about distribution that people listen to. This is
Yeah.
very odd, like not just content marketing, but like distribution and repurposing. Like it's so niche. It's hilarious to me that this works in this world. But
Mhm.
part of that too is I almost said be authentic. I'm not going to say be authentic.
No, it's
I
not.
can't do it. I can't do it.
Come back to that word in 6 to 9
That's right.
months.
Oh, it'll be back. It'll be back.
Yeah, it'll be back.
But I think being okay with who you are, your takes, your personality, and you're not going to be for everybody. That's okay. Your company is not meant to be for everybody.
Mhm.
That's a hard thing to put yourself out there because somebody somewhere is not going to enjoy your take or enjoy your piece on it. But so I think having that core sort of thing, I love that for a business because it gives you some level of consistency. And then when you remix, repurpose, regenerate all the stuff off of that, that starts the messaging flow. So I've got this thing, I'm just going to consistently do it. And then I can distribute that stuff all the time. And that can
Mhm.
just work for me. Like this
Mhm.
podcast, it just works for me all the time because I'm in a rhythm. I record the show. I have my ideas, my thoughts. I get to interview cool people. We talk about this stuff. And then you've already said multiple things on the show that might pivot some of my thoughts on stuff. Right. And so then
Mhm.
I'm going to get better and it's going to change how we talk about that.
Yeah, and then you can talk about those thoughts
Yep.
within your through line, within
Yep.
your umbrella. And
Yep.
that is like this right here in real time. Like, this is how it works. You are now going to be thinking about parts of distribution from my point of view. And you're going to then think, how does Erica's point of view vibe with my point of view? And you're going to have a thought on that. And literally just sharing that thought is content.
Yep, exactly. And so it's and again, it's like one of the funny things. I don't know if you've experienced this with some of the stuff that you've been doing with the long to short stuff, but like
Mhm.
sometimes there's too many outputs or
Mhm.
there's too many ideas that I could spin it off to this and I could do that and I could, and I think that's where having that consistent lever going of like, if you've got a weekly podcast, you only have to pick 52 things to talk
Mhm.
about. And so like
Mhm.
pick your themes, pick your POVs, pick your lanes, like talk about those things over and over and over again. It's going to resonate. If you're doing a monthly event, like I just did this with one client, they're doing a monthly event, that's going to be their main thing. And then we built out a system where that's basically going to run their top of funnel because they're going to be smart about what they're doing and they're planning distribution ahead. And now, as soon as they kick off that thing, emails get fired off,
Mhm.
social posts get written, things get created, blog posts get created. Like they've got a whole system and they're just doing one thing, which is this event. And it takes a lot of work. But once you build that system, then you're not coming into Monday and thinking like, crap, what are we doing this week? Because I've been in those meetings too. All right,
Mhm.
everybody, what are we publishing this week? What's going out on the blog this week? And it's like, that's a horrible place to be. So it gives you a way to get ahead and also gives you a way to be consistent. And that way, for me anyway, I know as long as the podcast goes out and the little legs that come off of it go out, we're good to go. And then I
Yeah.
can ebb and flow and adjust from there.
Totally. I've got my weekly newsletter right now that I write, and it's all within my topic of writing and communicating and editing better online. And what's cool with this course is I made it for people like me, for people like you that are, I don't know, well, actually, I'm guessing this about you, but I'm assuming that you have more experience writing long form, or that's at least where you started. And then you went to short form social
Yep.
as well. So, yeah, so most of the people in my life are in that, and we have tons of content out there. So, like this podcast, for example, you're going to have a transcript afterwards. That's long form content, in my opinion. So, it's for anyone that does long form anything more than a social post. And cool thing is, you can take all of that writing or transcript and put it through this system that I created in the course to pull out what I call golden nuggets. And those are like the best, most interesting angles from that piece of content that you just spent time creating, that you can then be like, okay, I'm going to take these like 5 nuggets and I'm going to run with them and I'm going to explore them deeper. And I think that's probably my favorite part of creating content so consistently, and why I do it almost every day, is because I thoroughly enjoy, because I know who I am and I know what I want to talk about. I enjoy asking myself, like, how can I think about this from a different way? Or if I didn't think this was the thing, and the reality was not what the reality is, how would that like affect things? What's the consequence? And then I talk about that, and it's like one big deep dive. Like, you're just endlessly diving deeper into whatever that core piece of content is. And I think some people this is where the hesitation comes in, where they're like, well, I don't want to talk about the same exact thing every single day. And it's like, you don't have to. It's not like there's one topic that you're only ever talking about. You're just living within whatever that core umbrella is. There's multiple topics, hub and spoke, however you want to phrase it. But there's multiple ways that you can look at something and talk about it. So maybe one day I'm talking about writing, one day I'm talking about editing, one day I'm talking about being authentic, air quotes. One day I'm talking about how you can, repurpose, regenerate your ideas. But it's all under this communicate better framework. And so you just have to repeat your core things, messaging all the time. So really, like, it's impossible to get bored if you think about it that way.
Mm-hmm. And the key too is like, how do those things, I actually have a kind of a map for this, but like ultimately you want to make sure the things that you're talking about, because tie back to what you sell and what you offer.
Yes, that's helpful.
It sounds obvious. And you've done a good job of that. But I can tell you that doesn't always happen. It certainly doesn't always happen with companies, and it doesn't even happen if you're running your own business either, because sometimes you can it's the lure of success on social, or building a big following, or building, like, you can talk about AI and get some interaction, but if you don't do it, if it doesn't tie into with what you're doing, who cares at the end of the day? And so I think for anybody listening that's, trying to come up with the themes and the points of view, it's like, all right, what problems does your services solve? Like, you got to kind of go back to the basics of your marketing plan, and then from there figure out, all right, what's my opinion on the, in this state of the world right now and how that works. And then like you said, then you just dive into different angles, come up with different things, test and iterate. One of the things that I've been talking a lot about is like validation on social. And so again, it's like, there are so many angles that I've taken, but I could tell you, for my course too, it's like, the more that you talk about those things, the more your ideas solidify, the stronger your opinions get, the better your perspectives are. My perspectives and opinions were not strong 3 years ago. How could they be? Maybe I faked it. But a lot of times too, it's like, and this is another key that I think is a shift, is like actually not being a quote unquote thought leader, but just sharing what you're seeing. Sharing what you're seeing in the marketplace, sharing things that you're like, people are so desperate for gut checks on like, am I doing this right? Are other people experiencing this? It's why communities are so popular. It's why social media is so popular, because it's like, what are other people doing?
Totally. Absolutely. It's so funny. Like, I can't believe how much of my life is content and how much I think about content. But I was going to say to something you said earlier, like, it's so easy, especially on social, to pivot away from your core topics and just talk about, actually, something that's super popular is to just complain about the platform that you're on. Like, that's guaranteed to perform well. If I'm
Talk
on
about LinkedIn and you're going to crush.
Like, man, LinkedIn sucks lately. Guaranteed 500 likes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so you have to be really careful on whatever equivalent you have in your life to that. Like, if you're not on LinkedIn, but if you're on something else, you have to be careful of making sure that like you said, you're actually sticking to your topics. Something that I like to ask myself before I post anything ever is literally sit down. Why am I posting this?
Hmm.
Why do I care? And why does my audience care? 3 questions, very simple. And if I don't have like a good answer to all 3 of those, then I'm not posting it. So I've definitely stopped myself a few times being like, okay, this might be fun to post, but do I really want to be associated with this? And again, like, will my audience actually care or learn anything? Will it potentially lead to sales at some point? Like, no, okay, there's no point for this, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I think some of the best advice I've gotten in business and content, etc., is, and it's a very tough balance, but it's don't look at what other people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Look at like, what do you want to do? Why are you doing this? Why are you creating this event, this monthly event? Who is this
Mm-hmm.
for? Not like what is X, Y, and Z person or X, Y, and Z creator. I think it's good to be inspired to be able to do that stuff, but that will only paralyze you. It'll paralyze your team. It'll paralyze your company because you're so worried about what X, Y, and Z person is doing. I used to laugh about this all the time when I was in house for years because it'd be like, look at what so and so company's doing, like with their messaging or with their this emails. And it's like, we should do, and I'm like, you have no idea if that even works.
Right.
Like you have like literally even the most successful creators, like you don't know if that
Yeah.
email series for their launch worked.
Right.
You also don't know if they spent $1 million in ads to have a 1.2 million launch, right? Like you don't know. Like they can say, hey, we did this really cool thing. And of course, social media, everybody's going to share what they did, but you really don't know. And so I think it's the same thing with content. It's easy to, especially on social media is brutal because it's like you get to see the likes and the engagements and all that stuff, but like you don't really know. Like,
Yeah.
is there an engagement pod behind this bad boy? Like, because it sure feels like there is. Like, how is this okay content getting 2,000 likes? Like, this just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel right. Or even if something like legitimately is timely, is helpful, and gets a bunch of likes, that doesn't mean you have to go chase after that same thing. It's actually going to distract you from doing what you should do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's extremely difficult to not to shy away from the things that you think are working for other people. And in the SEO world too, like I get it, like I want to rank,
Hmm.
I want to be on page 1. I'm jealous of that company that's on page 1, but I don't know, like what are you willing to sacrifice in order to get there? I guess. Is it really worth the fight that it's going to take to potentially rank there? Is it worth the neutral kind of boring content that doesn't actually do anything to make sales to just get that prize, that feeling?
Hmm.
So that is a whole like we get in the way of ourselves,
We sure
all the
do.
time.
We sure do. I mean, one thing I've told multiple people, even on this show, like, and I've posted about it on LinkedIn too, like, my favorite tool that I use is I got to make sure I'm getting the name right here. So if people want to look it up, it's an extension called, why can't I find it? Undistracted.
Mhm. Undistracted.
Undistracted, I think is, oh, I got to make sure I'm getting this right here for people. Yeah, undistracted. And literally what I do is I keep it like you can block basically social channels from allowing you to even like access them. But what I
Mhm.
do is actually go in and they have a feature that lets you hide the feed. So for on Twitter, X, for LinkedIn, like I will keep them open to where I can go to them unless I really want to go heads down work. But then I block the feed every day.
Wow.
And so it's actually been really, really helpful for me because not only because it's a time suck for me to like, I'm just scrolling my feed, but
Mhm.
then what I found for me was like, I'm scrolling my feed because, and I think you're probably similar, like constantly reverse engineering what other people are doing. I'm
Mhm.
like flooding my brain with ideas of things I could, should, would be doing or formats or styles, or I'm flooding my brain with the pure information that's in there. And it's just like, no, it's distracting. It's a
Mhm.
distraction from what I actually need to do. So, anybody listening slash Erica, like this tool has been a complete game changer for me.
Yeah. I need to take social media off my phone. I hear that that's
Ooh,
also
I did that two
extremely
years
helpful
ago.
too. Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Oh, man.
I did that too. So, I don't have email and I don't have social. I don't have either.
That's crazy. I don't have notifications, so, like, I don't get any, like, badges for anything,
Smart.
but I still totally check it way more than I should.
Yeah, email was a real killer for me when I started my business because it was a constant like, what's new? Did anything come in?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
going on? And social was just like same thing, like scrolling for the endless feed of something new.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't have either on I actually like, and again, I'm like maniacal about this, but I actually like went in and like blocked it so I could, because I was like, oh, I won't get the app, but I sign in on, on the Safari or whatever. It's like, no, you can't, don't even get in that. Like, you can't even get in there. So it took me, I think it was last summer, I took email off and like I took it off for a vacation and I never went back
That's awesome.
because it was so refreshing.
That's so cool. Okay, I'm going to rethink this.
I heard I think it was Tim Ferriss, and it made me feel much better about it. He said, there's no email that you can't respond to the next morning.
That's true.
And I was like, oh, that's wonderful. If Tim Ferriss can do it, I can do it. He's way more important than I am.
Now, just to tie this thread together, so now I've got this idea in my head that I should really not have these apps on my phone. So I bet you if I heard this like 2 or 3 more times, I would actually do it. That
right.
is the power of repurposing.
I'll put this clip out on social. I'll DM it to you. I'll get you there. I'll Slack it to you. I'll make it happen. Yeah. That's so true. So yeah, no, I think just to put a bow on all this, like we've really hit a lot of spaces. But I think for me, some of the biggest keys come down to like consistency, simplicity, and just executing well over time and not overcomplicating things. We make things so complex. It's comical. I go into work with some of these businesses and just see kind of how they're running. And I'm like, it's no wonder you're just spinning your wheels because there's 18 initiatives and 17 things and 12 goals. And you really think you're all going to hit those by the end of really think you're going to hit that by the end of the year? And so I think being able to come up with those 1 or 2 things that you do really, really well, have those strong points of view that you're going to be able to get out into the marketplace. I love that you're like strong on the points of view thing too. Cause I'm like, am I crazy out here on an island of like, this is so necessary for companies to have?
No, it's so necessary, like especially now and in the future. I think that it was much easier to get away with not really having a point of view, I don't know, 10 years ago, but you just need it now. And especially with people like not really giving a shit about company pages anymore. And they want to hear more from the people that are at these companies. Like executives are like scrambling, like, what is my point of view? And it's like, yeah, because you need one. People want to hear what your point of view is. And whenever I work with, like, I'm working with a founder right now of a very small brand new company, and he's trying to grow on social. And the first thing we did day one, what is your point of view on
Love
this?
That.
Like,
Love that.
Why do you care? Oh, my other favorite question is, what are common industry like points of view that many people hold that you strongly disagree with, and why? And if you don't, and if you just agree with everything, we need to dig deeper into what do you actually think and feel then.
Ooh, that's really good.
Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll send you my list of questions.
Yeah, you'll have to. That's great. Yeah, I've actually got a training coming up on this, so that'll be super helpful, I think, to be able to work through some of this stuff. But
yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's been awesome to chat, Erica. It's fun. Super fun.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah. Well, sweet. Like I said, is there anything you want to pitch before we get anything you got going on?
I mean, you can grab the course. I've got 3 courses, but for this conversation, the one that makes the most sense is long to short. So long-to-short.com, because long without dashes was taken. So and yeah, that's for anyone who writes anything longer than a social post, essentially. So a newsletter or blogs or articles, or if you have podcasts with transcripts and you want to kind of run it through an AI-powered system, like dissect it from a bunch of different angles and then get a bunch of social post ideas. That's a cool new course that I just put out. I mean, otherwise, yeah, follow me on LinkedIn, I suppose. That's awesome. Where I spend a lot of time.
Yep. We will see you on the LinkedIn wild. So awesome, Erica. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Distribution First, and thank you for listening all the way through. I appreciate you so so much. And I hope you're able to apply what you learned in this episode one way or another into your content strategy as well. Speaking of strategy, we have a lot of things going on this year that are going to help you build your brand, 10x your content, and transform the way you do content marketing. Make sure to subscribe to the show and sign up for my newsletter at justinsimon.co so you don't miss a thing. I look forward to serving you in the next episode as well. And until then, take care, and I'll see you next time.